Phase 1 of the truce and hostage deal between Israel and Hamas expires on March 1st. What happens if the sides do not agree on Phase 2? Where are the main disagreements? What is likely to happen next? I'm Alon Burstein. Let's dive in. On Saturday, March 1st, the first phase of the truce and hostage deal between Israel and Hamas comes to an end. During this first phase, 30 live hostages were released from captivity by Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. This includes 25 Israelis and 5 foreign nationals, and the bodies of 8 Israeli hostages were returned to Israel as well. 1,904 Palestinian prisoners were released from Israeli jails in exchange for these hostages. These include 737 prisoners who were sentenced in Israeli military courts over the years, as well as 1,167 Palestinians who were arrested in the Gaza Strip since the beginning of the war. Among the 737 prisoners who were released, 200 to 250 are considered quote-unquote heavy Palestinian prisoners. These include Palestinian prisoners who are leaders of militant factions, as well as those who are sentenced to life sentences in Israeli jails. In addition to these exchanges, the truce between the sides has broadly been maintained throughout this first phase, despite several violations. Among these violations were 3 times that Palestinian militants launched rockets from the Gaza Strip. Each and every one of those launches crashed into the Gaza Strip, in some cases causing fatalities of Palestinians. In addition to that, there were a few times when Palestinians entered into the no-go zones of the IDF perimeter, and they were fired upon. Beyond this, the IDF also carried out its withdrawal from different Palestinian cities during this first phase of the deal. The IDF also withdrew from the Netzarim corridor. It is now positioned only along the perimeter on the border between Israel and Gaza, as well as along the Philadelphia corridor between Gaza and Egypt. As a result of this withdrawal, for the first time since the war began, Palestinians were allowed to return to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. I remind everyone that many parts of the northern areas of the Gaza Strip have been completely destroyed in the different IDF operations and throughout the war. Finally, during the first phase, there was also an exponential rise in the entrance of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. This has reached upwards of 21,000 aid trucks that have entered into the Gaza Strip over the last 5 to 6 weeks, as well as the entrance of several units of industrial equipment and other equipment, such as the mobile houses and shelters for Palestinian refugees. With regards to what happens next, according to the terms of the original agreement between the sides, there was supposed to be an immediate bleed-through from Phase 1 into Phase 2 of the agreement. With this, Phase 2 itself is supposed to also be a 42-day phase that is supposed to include the mutual declaration on both sides of an indefinite ceasefire and an end to the war, the complete withdrawal of the IDF from the Gaza Strip, and the release of all remaining hostages in the Gaza Strip in exchange for an undetermined amount of Palestinian prisoners. Negotiations over Phase 2, and specifically over its implementation stages, and the formula of how many Palestinian prisoners will be exchanged for each Israeli hostage, were supposed to begin 3.5 weeks ago and supposed to be concluded up until last week, according to the original agreement. However, in practice, Israel did not send a team to negotiate the second phase until last week, and there's been no progress that has been reported regarding the implementation of the second phase. While Hamas has a clear interest in the implementation of Phase 2 and has declared that it is willing to negotiate it and progress towards the second phase and release all the remaining hostages in one coordinated event, Israel has raised new demands with regards to the implementation and what it will consider that has to be included within Phase 2. According to these new demands, this includes a complete demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, i.e. the Al-Qassam brigades of Hamas dismantling themselves, the exile of the Hamas leadership from the Gaza Strip, and not having the Palestinian Authority be part of any governing body in Phase 2 or future phases that may be implemented in the Gaza Strip. Hamas has in turn outright rejected these demands, leaving the sides at this point continuously negotiating on the one hand, but in somewhat of a stalemate as both sides aren't really presenting any new ideas, just saying what is not agreed upon as far as the other one is demanding. So what happens now once Phase 1 of the deal expires? The architects of the deal seemingly foresaw this likely situation where it would be at a stalemate at the end of Phase 1, and therefore they added into the deal a clause that states that even if there is no agreement on the actual implementation of Phase 2, as long as Phase 2 is being negotiated, all of the terms of Phase 1 will continue to be in effect. In other words, the truce and the vast increase of the entrance of humanitarian aid are automatically extended so long as negotiations over Phase 2 are continuing. Now, it's important to emphasize that despite this automatic extension of the terms of Phase 1, this does not include the ongoing release of hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Israel has tried to say that instead of negotiating Phase 2, it wants to have an extension of Phase 1, therefore continue the phased release of hostages in exchange for the same formula of Palestinian prisoners. However, Hamas has rejected those terms. It is also important to note that while the terms of Phase 1 are set to continue, the deal does include additional articles stating that regardless of the implementation of Phase 2, i.e., regardless of if the sides are still negotiating if Phase 2 has begun or if it is completely broken down, on day 42 of the deal, i.e., on March 1st, the IDF is supposed to begin its evacuation from the Philadelphia corridor, the border between Gaza and Egypt, and by March 9th, the Israeli military is supposed to completely evacuate its forces from that area. A few days ago, Israel announced that it does not intend to carry out such a withdrawal, and while some within the Israeli government have tried to state that this withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor is going to be part of the negotiations over the second phase of the deal, Hamas has in turn stated that this withdrawal is explicitly written as independent of the second phase of the deal, and has urged the negotiating countries to compel Israel to implement this redeployment. Considering what is likely to happen now that the Phase 1 of the deal is expiring and there is no agreement on the implementation of Phase 2, Hamas has a clear interest in attempting to negotiate the full implementation of Phase 2 of the agreement, since in such a situation, either the movement may secure the complete ceasefire and IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip if the negotiations are successful. If they're not successful, it will at least have an extended truce and continued entrance of humanitarian aid as long as negotiations are taking place. Israel, in turn, has an interest in applying pressure on Hamas to renegotiate the terms of Phase 2 and either achieve some of its stated demands regarding, for example, demilitarization or the exile of certain Hamas leaders, or possibly securing an extension of some of the aspects of the first phase. Specifically, Israel is interested in maximizing how many Israeli hostages may be released while not giving up as many Palestinian prisoners as might be negotiated if Phase 2 is implemented. It is also important to note that Israel is currently embroiled in a personnel change in the very top level of the military brass. IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi is retiring this week and is going to be replaced by Eyal Zamir. Therefore, it is very likely that Israel does not want to see a breakdown of the truce and a full return to fighting, while there is this change of personnel in the leadership of the military that is going to bring its own vision on how the war should be run. Therefore, in a moment of analysis, we are very likely to see, in the coming week at least, that both sides are going to tacitly extend the negotiations and wait to see which way the winds are blowing. Can they make certain achievements and try to bring the other side closer to their own vision? Obviously, this remains to be seen. I will say that I will be uploading an interview that I will do on Saturday night that is going to cover what happened on the day that the truce ended, where the winds are blowing, what do we know in terms of how the sides are developing, what can we possibly expect in the coming weeks. That is my brief highlight on the end of the Phase 1 of the hostage and truce agreement between Israel and Hamas. If you find these updates informative, please remember to hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when they come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.